want to begin with a medical truth that often unsettles people. Anxiety is not a flaw in your character, nor a weakness of will. It is a signal. It is the body speaking in a language we have not been taught to understand. And when we misunderstand that language, we begin to fear the very system that is trying to protect us. This misunderstanding has consequences. It shapes how we treat ourselves, how medicine approaches distress, and how entire societies interpret vulnerability. We come to believe that something has gone wrong inside us, when in reality something very intelligent is working too hard for too long. For much of modern history, we have treated anxiety as an enemy, something to suppress, silence, or eliminate as quickly as possible. The language we use reveals this attitude. We fight anxiety, we battle it, we try to get rid of it. Yet biology, when examined carefully, tells a far more nuanced story. Anxiety arises from systems refined over millions of years of evolution. These systems evolved to detect threat, mobilize energy, sharpen attention, and keep the organism alive. Without them, our ancestors would not have survived. The tragedy, then, is not that anxiety exists, but that in the modern world these ancient systems are exposed to conditions they were never designed for: chronic uncertainty, social disconnection, constant stimulation, and prolonged stress without resolution. Anxiety begins in the body long before it becomes a conscious thought. The heart quickens not because the mind decides to panic, but because autonomic circuits deep within the brainstem and limbic system initiate action. Breathing becomes shallow to increase oxygen availability, muscles tense in preparation for movement, blood flow is redirected away from digestion toward large muscle groups, the immune system shifts into a defensive posture. These responses are not mistakes, they are coordinated physiological strategies. Anxiety is not one malfunctioning switch, it is an entire network responding exactly as it was designed to respond, only in a context that no longer requires it. This is why anxiety feels so overwhelming. It engages the whole organism. People often describe it as if they are being hijacked from the inside. One moment they feel relatively stable, the next their body seems to take control. This loss of perceived control is itself frightening, which then feeds back into the system, amplifying the response. Anxiety, in this sense, is not a single event, but a loop. Sensation generates interpretation. Interpretation generates more sensation. When people speak of anxiety, they often focus on the mind, racing thoughts, catastrophic imagining, constant worry, or a sense of impending doom. But for many, the most distressing symptoms are physical: chest tightness, dizziness, trembling, nausea, gastrointestinal discomfort, chronic fatigue, headaches, or a persistent feeling of being on edge. Some experience derealization or depersonalization, a disturbing sense of being disconnected from reality or from oneself. These symptoms can be so intense that people fear they are dying, losing control, or going mad, and yet medically the body is not failing, it is reacting. What unites these diverse symptoms is not fear itself, but anticipation. Anxiety is the physiology of what if. It is the body preparing for a future threat. Importantly, the nervous system does not require certainty to activate. Possibility is enough. A memory, a thought, a bodily sensation, or a subtle environmental cue can all be interpreted as warning signs. The system's role is not to be accurate, but to be fast. From an evolutionary perspective, false alarms were far less costly than missed threats. But in modern life, false alarms accumulate. Here is where psychology and biology must speak to one another. Anxiety is not merely in the mind, as people are often told, nor is it simply a chemical imbalance to be corrected. It is a dynamic relationship between experience, memory, environment, and physiology. Early life experiences play a profound role here. Chronic stress, emotional neglect, trauma, or unpredictable caregiving can shape how the nervous system learns to interpret the world. When safety is inconsistent, vigilance becomes the default. The body adapts to its environment not by reasoning but by learning patterns. Over time, these adaptations become deeply ingrained. Regulatory thresholds change. Systems that once activated only during genuine danger begin to activate in response to everyday stressors. The body becomes efficient at anxiety. This is why people often say, "I don't know why I'm anxious, I just am." The cause is not always present in the current moment. It may be embedded in the system's history. One of the most misunderstood aspects of anxiety is its persistence. People ask, often with frustration or shame, "Why do I feel anxious when nothing is wrong?" The answer lies in how the body experiences time. The conscious mind lives in the present moment. The body, however, lives in probabilities and patterns. It remembers not as a story, but as a state. If the body has learned that the world is unpredictable or unsafe, it will maintain vigilance even during periods of calm. This is not irrational. It is adaptive until it becomes exhausting. Chronic anxiety is not a sign that the system is broken. It is a sign that it has not been allowed to return to baseline. In biological terms, stress responses are meant to be episodic. Activation followed by recovery. But when recovery is incomplete or absent, the system remains partially engaged. Over time, this leads to wear and tear, what medicine refers to as allostatic load. Anxiety, fatigue, sleep disturbances, and mood changes are all expressions of this burden. Treatment, therefore, must begin with respect, not with suppression, but with listening. This is a crucial shift in perspective. If anxiety is a signal, the goal is not to silence it prematurely, but to understand what it is signaling and why it persists. Medication can be immensely valuable, and in many cases life-changing. When anxiety overwhelms daily functioning, interferes with sleep, work, or relationships, pharmacological support may be necessary to reduce intensity and restore stability. But medication alone does not teach the nervous system why it no longer needs to remain on high alert. It quiets the signal without always addressing its origin. Remediation begins by restoring dialogue between mind and body. This dialogue is often disrupted in anxious states. People learn to fear their bodily sensations, to monitor them obsessively, to interpret them as signs of danger. Ironically, this hypervigilance sustains anxiety. Practices that gently re-establish trust in bodily processes are therefore essential. Breathing is one such practice, and it is frequently misunderstood. It is not a superficial relaxation technique. It is a direct interface with the autonomic nervous system. Slow, rhythmic breathing, particularly prolonged exhalation, activates the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, signaling safety. Over time, consistent breathing practices can recalibrate baseline arousal. They teach the body repeatedly and experientially that it is possible to be calm without threat. The same principle applies to movement. Gentle, rhythmic movement communicates safety and agency to the nervous system. It discharges excess energy that would otherwise remain trapped as tension. Sleep, too, is not merely rest, but active regulation. During sleep, emotional memories are processed, stress hormones are metabolized, and neural circuits are reorganized. Chronic sleep deprivation, therefore, is not a minor inconvenience. It is a powerful amplifier of anxiety. Nutrition also plays a role, not as a simplistic cure, but as part of systemic regulation. Blood sugar instability, inflammation, and gut-brain interactions all influence anxiety levels. The gut, often called the second brain, communicates extensively with the nervous system. Disruption in this communication can exacerbate anxiety symptoms. Again, this is not about perfection, but about supporting regulatory balance. Psychological treatment is equally vital, particularly approaches that emphasize awareness, meaning, and reinterpretation rather than control. When a person learns to observe anxiety rather than immediately react to it, something shifts. The sensation remains, but the interpretation changes. This is anxiety replaces this is danger. This distinction is subtle but biologically profound. The brain is not a passive observer of the body. It is a prediction machine. It constantly generates expectations about what will happen next. Change the prediction and physiology follows. Therapeutic approaches that address trauma are especially important for those whose anxiety is rooted in past experiences. Trauma is not defined solely by catastrophic events. It is defined by overwhelm without support. When experiences exceed the nervous system's capacity to cope, they leave imprints. Healing involves gently revisiting these imprints, not to relive them, but to allow the system to complete responses that were once interrupted. There is also a social dimension to anxiety that cannot be ignored. Humans are inherently relational organisms. Safety is not only an internal state, it is communicated externally. Facial expressions, tone of voice, touch, shared attention, these are regulatory signals. Isolation deprives the nervous system of these cues. In isolation, ambiguity increases, and ambiguity is fertile ground for anxiety. Healing, therefore, often unfolds in connection. Not necessarily in large groups, but in safe, attuned relationships where the nervous system can gradually learn that it is not alone. Perhaps the most painful aspect of anxiety is shame. People feel ashamed of their symptoms, ashamed of needing help, ashamed that they cannot simply cope the way others seem to. This shame compounds the problem. It adds another layer of threat, the threat of judgment. From a biological perspective, shame is a powerful stressor. It activates the same systems as physical danger. To heal, one must abandon the idea that anxiety is a personal failure. It is a human response in a world that often exceeds our biological limits. I want to leave you with this reflection. Anxiety is not asking to be eradicated. It is asking to be understood, regulated, and reassured. The body is not broken, it is overworked. And when we approach it not with fear, but with curiosity and care, something remarkable happens. The system begins to soften, the noise lowers, the responses become less urgent. What once felt like an enemy reveals itself as a messenger, one that no longer needs to shout to be heard. Healing does not mean the complete absence of anxiety. That would be neither realistic nor desirable. Anxiety, in appropriate measure, is part of being alive. Healing means restoring flexibility. It means the ability to respond to genuine threat and to return to calm when the threat has passed. It means balance. And balance, in biology as in life, is never static. It is a continuous conversation between mind and body, past and present, individual and environment. When we learn to participate in that conversation with patience and respect, anxiety loses its grip, not because it has been defeated, but because it has finally been understood.